And we are back for Talking Sport, and our next guest is someone that I'm very, very excited to speak with. She's a graduate from the Australian Ballet School. She's danced with the Australian Ballet Dancers Company, Queensland Ballet. She's done psychology with masters and a doctorate in sport and exercise psychology. She's worked in the arts, the elite sport, in the corporate sector. She's done it all.
Oof, she sounds like a busy lady.
Oh my gosh. So it is my pleasure to welcome Professor Jean Moyle to the show. Hello.
Hello, how are you?
We're fantastic. Thank you for joining us. I'm so excited to meet you.
Likewise.
So Jean, you've got quite a background, but it's my understanding your focus at the moment is to do with high performance and performance enhancement. Is that correct, or is that just one area that you focus on?
I look, it's one area. I think the main part of the kind of sport and exercise and performance psychology work that I do tends to now be more in the performing arts, although I've worked across a range of different areas in elite performance.
Interesting stuff. So what made you get into this particular field?
Well, because I was a ballet dancer myself, and I found that when I suffered an injury that took me out of dancing for 3 months, and this was like in the early 90s, and sports psychology really wasn't a thing here in Australia. And so I had the kind of idea at the time that when I transitioned out of my dance career that I wanted to go and study sport and exercise psychology. I'd heard about it, with the opportunity to apply it back into dance specifically and more broader into the sports sector.
That's fantastic.
Yeah.
So interesting. So in terms of your profession at the moment, you mentioned that you do a lot of work with the arts.
Mm-hmm.
So can you tell us a little bit about that?
Yeah, sure. Look, at the moment, I'm in a fortunate position, having kind of worked in the field for over 22 years, to kind of pick and choose the things that I have some time to do. So at the moment, I'm kind of in my private practice, which I've always had alongside all the different roles and work that I've done. I'm working with some professional performing artists with some of the professional companies here in Australia. So more on a individual level at the moment, although I have worked a lot in broader companies and sporting programs and with institutes and things like that.
And in terms of the sporting side, because we are talking sport here
we
today.
Do love our sport.
We do love our sport. Do you tend to focus on players or teams that have injury problems, or is it more about enhancing performance?
It's all of the above. So I think one of the myths about sport and exercise psychology is that, oh, look, we'll go and get a sports psych because we need to psych people up, or people have an injury, or they've been deselected, or things like that. And at the end of the day, sport and exercise psychology is about all facets, that we're dealing with every individual as well as collective teams and programs to support them to enhance every aspect of their performance. And obviously a range of different things can impact upon that. So whilst there is a lot of a lot of work that is done individually, and obviously when injuries or things come up, it's really the whole gamut of things that you're dealing with in terms of sport, enhancing performance, dealing with off-field or outside team issues that might be impacting upon you, because at the end of the day, you're a human being and you have relationships and concerns and, a whole range of different things. So we don't split those things out. It's a holistic approach, but really trying to maximise and support people to be and perform at the best level that they can.
Yeah. Hello, Professor Moyle. Fazman
Hey,
here.
Fazman, how are you?
Yeah, very well, thanks. Talking about sports psychology, my niece is an Olympic swimmer, and years ago, her coach said, look, she's got all the attributes to be a great swimmer. We just need to teach her how to win. It was like she was a great swimmer, great technique, but she needed that real oomph and to really push herself to that last bit and really be a competitor. And through sessions that she had back then, she's really, really gone on to now be an Olympic and world champion. And I certainly think that a lot of that was part of the reason why she improved, and she's a real competitor now.
Look, for sure. And I think that's the thing in terms of often, there's so much focus. We know that obviously the physical and the technical aspects of any sport are critical to be able to do the sport. But often you'll get, people that might from one day to the next be incredible in terms of their physical capabilities and technique, yet they perform really well on one day and not on the next within 24 hours. Now, you could account for some kind of fatigue aspects depending upon the sport, that kind of thing, but at the end of the day, it really is the mental side that really makes the difference. And I think that's, I'm a little bit biased, obviously, as a sports psychologist, but I've certainly seen that, in any setting that I've worked in, that ability to really focus on how we developing the mental side of what it is that we do in a whole range of psychological areas to help support the capabilities and skills that we have in terms of being sports specific.
And when you're watching sport yourself, or you're watching the Olympics, or you're watching World Championships, and you see up and comers, do you sort of think, oh, gee, I'd love to have a session with some of those athletes because I reckon I could really take them to the next level? Is that how you think when you're watching sport?
Look, probably not about me taking them to the next level, but I'm interested, there's certainly things that you see as a psychologist that you wonder, wow, I wonder what's going on for them. Or I wonder, how they've prepared, or I wonder what potentially may have not gone to plan, if it's not the performance that they want, or if it is, what is it that they've put in that's actually reinforced their ability to perform really well. So it's probably more about, seeing things and wanting to understand the why behind what happened, or whether it's a great performance or a poor performance.
Yeah, right. Yeah, I mean, I look at, say, AFL as a sport, and you can see 1 year a player will just have an amazing season, and they might win a best and fairest, or they'll be kick more goals than they've ever kicked before, and then the next year they fall off, and you wonder how can they have great form and be such a dynamic player 1 year, and the next season they just don't perform to that level.
Look, I think it can be a range of different things. So certainly there can be individual factors that could be stuff that has nothing to do with their sport that could be impacting and they're just not coping. It could be there's a sense of burnout or a loss of motivation, or that they feel challenged in terms of their confidence or capability. But also, and one of the things I'm very passionate about is that culture, in terms of the culture that's set up within a sporting team, is so critical in terms of the ability for all of the individuals in that team to perform to their best capabilities. And sometimes just changes in different players, obviously changes in coaches, changes in support staff, that can all have an impact. And I think that's the one thing that certainly when I'm supervising Masters of Sports Psych students that are coming through and in placements and learning how to do it, is that ability to say, well, hey, you might get engaged, and really the individual athlete is the one that's performing even if they're part of a team, but you have to think about the system and the culture that they operate within. And if you're only looking at that one individual without seeing that there are broader potential factors and cultural aspects that impact upon their ability to perform well, then yes, they might be successful, but maybe not as successful as they could be if that kind of team culture was actually really positive.
Yeah. Now, I know that you're a Collingwood supporter, and you are coming up against SD and my team, the Tigers.
Yes, I was aware of that.
I know the Tigers in 2016 weren't performing very well at all, and they reckon that the team just totally opened up their vulnerability. And it came from the coach, came from the captain, it came from everybody getting up in front of their peers and just telling them about some of the struggles or some of the things that it's hard for them to talk about in front of their whole group. And they reckon that totally changed their performance, because it was like something had come off the top of their shoulders. They weren't carrying all that baggage and mental sort of history of things that they've had to deal with. And Richmond went on to win a premiership. And they were second or third bottom the year before and getting thumped. So it's incredible, isn't it?
Look, it is, and I think that's the thing. When you're thinking about, that development of that team culture, that ability. One of the foundations of that is trust as well as mutual respect and understanding. And so, if people are really, able to role model and step forward into that vulnerability and say, "Hey, I'm human. I make mistakes, or I'm worried about this, or I'm worried about that." Imagine younger players seeing senior players actually talk about, I feel like I'm lacking a bit of confidence, or I really don't feel sometimes that I play very well. And it's like, people, they're human too. Wow, okay. But also just the sharing, like with anything, when we share experiences together with people and go through that together, you form that kind of relationship that really has that connection and that backing, that backing of each other when the times get tough.
Now, speaking of relationships, having done a little bit of study in this field myself, not nearly as much of you, of course, I know that relationships between a psychologist or any form of practitioner with the individual or with the person is essential to that process. I'm interested to know, is there a difference, though, when we're talking about sports professionals? Do you need to get to know their game a little bit? Do you need to understand what it is that they're doing, how their sport works in order to be able to assist them and form that relationship?
Look, absolutely. And I think that's the thing, being a sport and exercise psychologist, most of the work we do, we're not sitting in a room where people come to us. We're on the side of a field, on a track, we're traveling. I used to freak out the kind of clinical psychologist that I used to supervise at times when I'd say, hey, I've actually had to sleep in the same room as my client at the Olympics, because we had to share rooms in the athlete village, and the two, individual athletes didn't want to compete, they didn't want to sleep in the same room with each other. They wanted to be separated. So again, we're all the same gender, obviously, but so I think the aspects of you need to learn the sport, the language, the culture, everything about that. Like many of the Winter Olympic sports that I worked with, skeleton and short track speed skating, I'd never done them before. I'd never even heard of effectively skeleton. It was a talent identification program in Australia at the time when we first started. And so that ability it's not just the individuals that you're building that relationship with, the broader team of people that work around it, but that ability to invest the time to understand what that sport is actually about and what it means, so that you can then contextualize how you're working with the individual or the team or the program.
Yeah, that's interesting, because I can't see anything sane about being in the skeleton. That's crazy. That's crazy. I mean, have you seen how fast they go? That's madness.
Yeah, about 120 kilometres an hour, head first down a icy track.
Absolutely.
I just get nervous when Richmond are about 4 points in front against Collingwood, And
I can't even watch some games.
Yeah, and then all of a sudden, De Goey gets it. He's 45 metres out and he's on the right and it goes bang! That sort of stuff. I get a little bit nervous when that happens, Esther.
Well, I remember when I was a teenager, I used to be a bit of a runner, but whenever it came to competition time, I never performed at my best, because I felt so much pressure about expectation of winning or achieving a particular time that I basically, I almost looked at who's my closest competitor, and I set out to just compete with them. Like I befriended them. I wouldn't go out there and just run my own race. It was always about the closest competitor.
Didn't have the killer instinct.
No, I didn't. I didn't. And
Well, I was just going to say, what you're talking about there is something we do focus on in sports psychology, which is it's really important, like the outcome goal, which is a time or winning. It's black and white in terms of it's one or the other. And it's important to have that kind of approach or focus, of course, but we work with people to put that to the side, because if you only focus on that outcome, you put more pressure on yourself, you increase in terms of performance anxiety, expectations, all of that kind of thing. So how do we work with athletes actually to recognise, of course, if I'm in the Olympics, I'll be working towards a medal. It's very clear in terms of rankings and times. However, I really need to focus on what are the things I need to do day to day and training session to training session and competition to competition that I need to improve on, that increases the likelihood that I'll reach that outcome goal.
I guess I definitely need a gene. when I was back
I think everyone needs a Gene Moyle, yeah.
I even need myself at times, and I'm not very good at it. Working on myself.
Now you live up there in Brisbane. There's the Gold Coast Suns. There's the Brisbane Lions. Do you ever go and watch those games, or do you go to the NRL and watch the Broncos and just enjoy live sport as well, rather than part of your job?
Look, certainly. I certainly love and enjoy live sport. I'd have to say, obviously, it being a Collingwood supporter by marriage, that effectively most of the AFL games that we watch, if they are with a Brisbane or a Gold Coast-based team, is because Collingwood's actually playing them. So that kind of takes priority. Certainly, speaking of that, I'm actually going to the Reds versus Crusaders game tomorrow night.
Right.
So that will be so that'll be a good game to see. But yeah, so certainly in terms of it's, again, depending upon the sports that you're working in, you're obviously spending a lot of time watching the sports that you work with.
Yes.
Which sometimes, and then, with my my work in the arts sector too, going to lots of performances and shows. So sometimes, there's not as much time to go and watch as much other types of sport as you might like to.
Yeah, yeah. And do you get involved with corporate organisations and teamwork? Is that a form that the corporate groups come and seek your advice from?
Look, absolutely, and through my career, I have spent time working in global consulting organisations that focus explicitly on kind of leadership and team development from a culture and performance perspective. So it's that ability to, and that's why I love sport and exercise psychology, and for the most part, I tend to call it performance psychology, because it doesn't matter what the area is that you're performing in, so to speak. It could be work and working with engineers that sit in front of a laptop designing things all day. I work actually at the Queensland University of Technology and help support the esports program there as well. So, it's not just the people that are on the field or on a stage. It's anybody in whatever it is that you're actually doing, trying to support people to perform at the best possible, level that they can.
Yeah, well, I think, SD, that we could later on in the year, we could maybe ask Professor Moyle how our performance is going.
I was thinking exactly the same thing.
Because we're into episode 4 now,
yes.
And, it's a long season. So we just want, to take it step by step, but there's always the end goal. The end goal.
There is, and one thing I would say is that the one thing that I'd always look at debriefing in terms of any athlete or team is what was one thing you did well and one thing that you choose to do differently next time. So there you go.
Right,
have a shot at that.
Yep, there's some great advice. Anyone listening out there that needs some advice, you've just got some fantastic advice from Professor Moyle. Well, I've taken a fair bit out of that, and that's really extraordinary, your career. I have a look at your LinkedIn profile, and I just thought, wow, where does this lady get the time to fit it all in? But you've had an amazing career, and is it something you still have the passion for year after year, or do you think you'll get to a point where you want to take a rest for a while?
Look, I'm sure I will. I mean, I really enjoy the variety of the things that I get to do, and I think that's that aspect of having, getting to apply performance psychology across different sectors, including, being in senior executive roles at universities where you're still working with people or you're helping to support, enhancing performance in a different context. It's that ability to really support people, and helping people learn about their brains and how they can better use them to their advantage. So it keeps me on my toes, and then outside of that, I having done kind of ballet, I ended up picking up Kyokushin karate about 2.5 years ago. So that's what I train in outside of work, and I really enjoy the challenge of that as a different type of inverted commas sport to try your mental skills in.
Yeah.
Wow.
She keeps keeps a pretty busy
She does,
timetable.
and the reality is, I could ask question after question after question because I love the human brain and how we all think. But I won't do that because you're a busy woman and you've got so many letters after your name that I've run out of time to say them all.
It's ridiculous. My brother pays out on me all the time about that.
Oh, fantastic! But really, thank you very much for your time. As we mentioned, you're a very busy lady. You've probably got many appointments booked in weeks and probably months in advance, but to spend some time with us to help all our listeners have amazing interviews like yourself to be on, I'd really appreciate it. And I've loved chatting to you, and I know SD has. She's going through a uni degree at the moment. She's a real tertiary, unlike myself. I'm just a talker.
No, it's great, guys. I really appreciate being on the show, and I think you're doing a fabulous job. I've listened to your episodes, so it's great. Well done.
Well, before you go though, I think we're going to have to get a tip for the Richmond Collingwood game. Who are you going for? Well, I know who you're going for, but who do you think is going to get the win?
Look. Of course, I'm going for Collingwood. Look. Collingwood, otherwise I'd be shot by my husband if I didn't say anything else.
Safety is important.
We could probably go a little easier on you then. And do you think Brisbane can win tonight, being a Queenslander up there? It's in Melbourne. It's against the Western Bulldogs, but
Well, again, too, putting my kind of I hope to hat on. I hope Brisbane wins, but we'll see whether or not that actually eventuates.
Well, if they don't, maybe they should give Professor Jean Moyle a call and she can give them some tips on how to perform better, SD.
Indeed, and if not, you better head down to Hawthorn because they're in some strife, I think. Thank you so much, Professor Moyle, for joining us on Talking Sport. It's been an absolute pleasure. All the best with the rest of your career. It's just going to keep going and going, I think. Yeah. And it's been a real honour to have you on today's show.
Cool. No worries. Thanks, SD, and thanks, Bazman. Have a good one.
Thank you, Professor Moyle. Bye-bye.
See ya.
Well, amazing.
Wow.
Honestly, I have so many questions, but I thought, no, I'm just going to contain myself.
Yeah. Fascinating, isn't it?
It is fascinating. And I think, even if you think about, say, the Essendon Football Club and the drama that they've had in the last decade.
Oh, yeah.
Even
the
though
saga and all of that.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Even though that's gone, you wonder the longer term impact on the club. It's just the same as if you've got traumas or issues or challenges within a family environment. You often see the children or the grandchildren impacted by that as well. So it's good to see. Well, I'm hoping that Essendon are now turning that corner. Yeah. They've had they're looking a bit better.
Oh, when you look at things like, say, Jobe Watson, who was the skipper, he lost the love of the sport that he grew up with. His father was a champion footballer at Essendon as well, and they even stripped him of a Brownlow medal due to the fact of saying he doesn't qualify because of the issue that they had with the drug cycle. So, look, how that changed him. He jumped on a plane and went to America and completely lost football. Now he's back as a commentator. Yeah. So maybe he's had some counselling or some sessions with someone to say, look, what can we do to get that love of the game back, and can you put that history behind you and move on? And obviously he's been able to do that. So he's now a commentator with Channel 7. So interesting.
And this is the thing I liked about this interview. You talk about commentating and moving into that kind of role, but when people are interested in sport, there are careers out there where you don't need to be the player.
No.
You don't need to be the performer. You can go into sports psychology. You can be a physio. There's
you can be the water boy.
You can be the water boy.
Be part of
That's
the
right.
hype. But you can be part of it.
You can be the mascot running around, which is my dream.
Yeah.
So
we're working on that.
We're working on that.
Yeah.
But it just shows you that sport is for everyone, and that there is so many careers available within it, and you can really get out there and
it's
be part
about
of
fun too. It's not,
my goodness.
You don't have to be the world champion or the best and fairest. Just get out and enjoy yourself. It's social. You see, it's good for your mental health.
There's studies on that. It's absolutely good for your mental health.
You might not win the game, but you might have kicked your first goal, and you could talk about it all week and tell the grandparents that, I kicked a goal, and all that stuff, and then all the friends get around you and support you, pat you on the back. Sport's been wonderful when I was growing up. I loved it. I just wanted to kick the footy, or I just wanted to go and play some backyard cricket, or play a bit of basketball. I was no champion, but I love sport, and hence while we're talking sport now.
While we are talking sport, that's right. But it's probably time to stop talking for a little minute, and we might go to another song, but we'll come back. We might talk a little bit more. We'll see if we must be getting close to the kickoff now, I think.
Yeah.
So we'll check in with that. And we've got lots of other bits and pieces coming up in the show. So stay with us. You're here with SD and the Fazman for Talking Sport. And now we're going to Never Surrender by Liv Ash.